Que pasa, fantasy people? This is Razzball right on the Fantasy Sports Network. I'm Nick Capozzi, and it's Monday, so we're always privileged on Monday to have head football editor from Razzball.com, Jay Longfellow, a.k.a. JayWrong, a.k.a. JayWrong. Hi, Jay. Did you enjoy football this Sunday?
I did. I did. It was an interesting weekend for us. And first, I gotta say, I'm looking at you, and I think we're both like in solidarity. We're celebrating the Movember month correctly here. Awareness against cancer, growing out the beard and whatnot. So it's one of the few months that we can go hobo and no one really cares. So
Yeah, I've had this for a while, but I think I should do Movember. You got to get rid of the beard, and you have to actually shave November 1st. I believe those are technically the rules. Not that I'm sure of this. So we're kind of faking it, but I guess it kind of works with our slacker mentality.
right, whatever beats cancer, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All about that. All joking aside. Okay, let's get to some football. The Chiefs 24, Seahawks 20. So, I was looking kind of through the data here, and of course, you want to read his rundown, Jay's rundown, every Monday at football.razzball.com because not only is it poignant, it's hilarious. A lot of these things I can't mention on air. But here's something I want to point out to you. Everyone's been kind of meh about Russell Wilson this year, correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's a general reaction and dangerous. He's fifth in QB scoring this year, believe it or not, according to ESPN standard scoring. So, tell me, my man, are you comfortable if you've got Russell Wilson as your starting quarterback right now, or are you maybe looking to deal as the playoffs get closer?
I mean, I'm comfortable. He's definitely better in fantasy than he is in real football. Just because, well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say that. He is what he is, and he's a guy who uses his legs, and he'll get you points in real football and fantasy football through that manner. I mean, I always lump him with Kaepernick, but I like Wilson more. I like him as a top 10 guy, and in your standard leagues, that's startable. You don't need to find an upgrade if that's who you're going with into the playoffs.
You can't compare him to Cap, though, because Kaepernick, I think, is like 14th or 15th in QB scoring. So, it's light years apart. And, listen, neither of them have wide receiver weapons, but Russell Wilson, as far as I'm concerned, is a legit NFL quarterback. And if he had any kind of receiver, with all due respect to Doug Baldwin, could take it to a next level. Give him a Gronk or Demaryius Thomas and see where dangerous is. Sorry. So I'll get off my Demaryius soapbox right now.
Give us like a Percy Harvin, or a Golden Tate. So.
No, well, listen, part of it's the offense because obviously Tate's having a great year this year in Detroit, but we'll get to that later. Falcons in first place in their division, 4-6. This division could actually put a 6-10 team in the playoffs, which would be bananas. They beat the Panthers. Let's talk about Cam Newton. Looked like a few weeks ago Cam was maybe on the come. He was going to have a good opportunity. He had a couple of good games, especially against Cincinnati. Here's what I think. I think right now, if he's your quarterback, go and get another one. But I don't think it's necessarily his fault. I mean, look, he's playing on a couple of bad ankles, and that offensive line has gone from bad to horrible to wretched. I still think there's some upside there. And look, Kelvin Benjamin keeps producing. Benjamin now 52 catches, 768 yards, and 8 touchdowns. How do you feel about Cam and Kelvin?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I've been a little stubborn with Newton, but it's pretty obvious that he's still not healthy. I mean, and of course, like you said, the team, all the phases of that team are not helping him at all. They're essentially dragging him down because they have no defense right now. Their offense is kind of in shambles, minus Olsen and Benjamin. So yeah, Benjamin is still getting his numbers, which is great. But Newton, he's kind of a fringe guy for me at this point. Maybe a bench guy if he improves. This team always finishes strong. But right now, I'd feel uncomfortable if he's my QB1. So I might try to upgrade there if the price is right.
Yeah, go and make a deal. Listen, go get Russell Wilson off someone. People are down on him. Go get him. Do it. So this was a battle of two teams that really confused me, and I don't know how to rate either one. Well, maybe I do with the Saints. Bengals 27, Saints 10 at home. I mean, come on, man. The highlight of this game was when the Bengals scored a touchdown and the guy tried to give it to the girl in the Bengals jersey, and the New Orleans fan swiped it from her, which was odd, and then watching her beg.
Well, to be fair, after watching any Dalton this season, their first instinct should be to intercept the ball from a Bengals receiver. So, I mean, if she's wearing the Bengals uniform, And you don't know if her name was Katrina, it's totally justified,
Dude. Okay. So the key takeaway for me out of this game was Jeremy Hill, 27 carries, 152 yards, 2 monster games out of 3. How is this running back situation going to play out? Because it looks like Gio Bernard might be back for week 12. So how do you see this kind of shaking?
Well, it's interesting because at the beginning of the year, they wanted a timeshare there. It seemed that we were going to get a timeshare with Hill kind of filling the law firm role. And it didn't really happen until Bernard got injured. And then we see Hill come in, then he does badly, of course, and then he does well again. Of course, this has something to do with the teams they play against. But when Bernard comes back, obviously they're not going to give him a full load. And I think we could see that timeshare that we're supposed to see all the way back in week 1 from here on out. So that means that while Bernard and Hill probably don't have, the top 10 value that you'd want out of a running back 1, they could find their numbers. I think Hill still remains fantasy relevant with Bernard's return. And Bernard, of course, still keeps some relevancy, but his ceiling is lowered, obviously.
I might dish Gio Bernard right now. If you've got him and someone's hankering for a running back and you can get a decent return on investment, I might do that. Because I just think Hill is going to cut into the carries.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously they're both really talented. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Buccaneers 27, Washington football team 7. 2 takeaways here, and I'm going to get to Mike Evans in a sec. But Charles Sims, only 13 carries for 36 yards, 3 catches. But this guy was a monster pass catcher in college. I think there's a good opportunity for him. I bought him actually low in a league the other day, hoping, because I'm kind of weak at running back. Basically, I traded Trent Richardson for Charles Sims. So I'm gambling. We'll get to Trent a little bit later. But Mike Evans, 7 receptions, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. Here's my question. Actually, I got to point this out. Mike Evans, 46 catches, almost 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, 27 points, 21 points, 35 points, 5 TDs last 3 games. Who would you rather have going forward? You got 30 seconds. Kelvin Benjamin or Mike Evans?
I'd like to say, it's tough. It's really close. I'm going to give the edge to Evans simply because I have a little more faith in the fact that Tampa Bay gets to play against, well, I guess they play against the same team, so it's not really that. It's a flip of the coin, honestly. They're both equal. Evans, of course, had that monster game because I could probably catch 100 yards on a Jim Haslett defense. So, not to take anything from it.
We got to go to break, but I will say this. If you started RGIII yesterday, I'm sorry for you. I really am. Razzball Radio Fantasy Sports Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Razzball Radio Fantasy Sports Network. Nick Capozzi, Jay Longfellow, head football editor of Razzball.com. We're going over the games of the weekend, which is what we do on Monday because, what else would we do on Monday? Really, think about it. We're going to get to the Broncos-Rams, but real quick, last segment I mentioned RG3. Sorry if you started him. 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. I'm going to make this statement right now. I think that RG3, there's some really good matches coming up. Obviously the guy hasn't played in a while. There's some rust there. I think he might be okay rest of the year. I know it was an absolute stinker yesterday, but I'm just saying I'm not pulling the parachute on him yet. You with me on that, or am I on an island here?
No, I'm with you. I think you can't start him right now until you see something positive, but there is a curve here that he must travel. He's still essentially just coming back from, it almost seems like he's coming back from 2 years ago because of all the off time. It definitely hurts his development cycle. And so just give him some time. The Gruden offense, it doesn't seem like the most complex offense, but you still have to learn it, you still have to play in it, and you still have to get used to it. So let's give him some time, and let's give him that time on your bench.
All right, Broncos get upset by the Rams, 22-7. Rams have been playing real good. And you know what? I was watching the games yesterday with my cousin, and he pointed out the Rams now are only 4-6, I think. I think they're 4-6. But a lot of the games they lost were actually close, where they were up and, just kind of mistakes of a young team. This is a team on the rise, and they legitimately beat the tar out of Peyton Manning, who, is it January, Peyton? What's going on? He did, obviously there were some injuries. Sanders got dinged up, Julius Thomas. But you know what? I think it's just an off day for the Broncos. I still think they're legitimate. I still think you're starting Peyton every single week. But, keep note, the Rams defense is available in a lot of leagues. Talk to me about Tre Mason, 29 carries, 113 yards. What happened to Zach Stacy? He's just gone. It's like they cut the guy. So this is obviously this is Mason's team to run with right now, I guess.
Yeah, he's pretty much he's pretty much the 2013 Zach Stacy, coming in about midway at the year and becoming effective with a whole bunch of carries. Yeah, Zach Stacy, it's interesting because I had a lot of faith in him to continue this season, but of course the Rams got off to a terrible start, and Zach Stacy couldn't really establish it, so they went, by running back by committee, and Mason has taken the reins of that. I like Mason just because he's doing what Stacy did last season. Like I said, he's getting you that grunt yardage, and you saw that yesterday. And so I like him as a running back 2 or a flex option. I'm not sure where the ceiling is because they still have a tough remaining schedule. And to be fair on the Broncos, they were missing a couple guys. Ball re-injured, his groin. JT had an issue. Emmanuel Sanders got knocked out of the game essentially. So, and I can't really blame Peyton Manning if he thinks it's January. I stepped outside today. It feels like January.
It's even cold here in Phoenix. Holy cow. C.J. Anderson, 9 carries, 29 yards, 8 receptions, 86 yards. You mentioned Monty Ball re-aggravating the injury. We'll talk more about that later in the week. But right now, C.J. Anderson's the guy there. He's absolutely startable, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he's the only guy there, so you have to.
All right, let's. We spent a little bit too much time on that game. My fault. 49ers 16, Giants 10. Frank Gore, 19 carries, 95 yards. But Eli, holy cow, 5 INTs. You weren't starting him, but how do you feel about the young wide receivers if you're starting those guys, Randall and Old Dirty Bastard? I mean, I always say that, Odell Beckham Jr. I always think ODB.
Yeah, no, I still like Danielle. I still like Beckham. I still like them. Eli Manning will have games like this. He'll also have games where he'll be good. He'll be competent, which, I understand is few and far between, but he'll do it. And I think I'm not really a Randall guy, but those other 2 guys I still like rest of the season.
All right, let's go to the Vikings losing to the Bears. I thought the Vikes had a chance in this game. Actually, I streamed that defense everywhere yesterday, which didn't really work out for me. Cutler can't do anything right, but the receivers, rebounded. Alshon Jeffrey, 11 catches, 135 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Marshall, 7 for 92 TDs. Are you comfortable starting these guys right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they actually showed a little fire. And again with Jay Cutler, I have to say I watched his interceptions. One of them was garbage time interception. Another one was sort of Jeffrey's fault. He didn't really fight for the ball. So I'm willing to not blame Cutler on those 2. Of course, you start Matt Forte. Marshall, he's been kind of sinking down the rankings just because he really hasn't had a good game since maybe week 2 or week 3. I forget which one where he had the 2-touchdown game, but this is a thing where you have to start your studs. It's really hard not to, but you just have to. I mean, who do you have a better option than Marshall and Jeffrey if you have them on your team? Are you going to start, like an Andrew Hawkins over them? I don't think you should, even though it might be the smart play. It's just because they can have games like this.
Let me ask you a question. I made a deal this week in a league where you get to keep 6 players, no draft picks or dollar values attached to them. And I'm pretty solid at wide receiver. I got some great quarterbacks, but I've been having problems with running back this year. So I traded away Alshon Jeffrey and Trent Richardson. I got back Brandon Cooks, Charles Sims, and Devonta Freeman, hoping that either Sims or Freeman will hit rest of season. And I love Cooks long term. So in a dynasty format, how do you think I did in that deal?
I'm fine. I'm okay with it. Getting rid of Richardson is probably the highlight of that deal for me. But I love Cooks like you do. And to be honest, even though Sims had a bad game, they essentially didn't need a running game against Washington the other day. And when he was in the game, he looked powerful. He looked like a good straight-line runner. And he had some speed there. So I really liked what I saw. I think long-term, your players, even though you're losing Jeffrey, will outweigh that value.
And here's my logic this year. It is winter time. And Chicago plays a lot of outdoor games. Remember, Minnesota now is they're done with Minnesota for the year. I was going to say Minnesota's playing outside. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm worried about Jeffrey in December having to catch balls, whereas Cooks gets the nice, warm, comfy dome.
Right, and you have to remember the Bears are not very good. Even though they won this game, they're not going to the playoffs. They're not going to be a good team going forward.
Most interesting thing out of the Texans beating the Browns is J.J. Watt. Just does everything, including score a touchdown. Real quick, 15 seconds. Alfred Blue, do you like him long term?
I still don't. I don't know what it is with me and Blue.
Me
We just don't like each other. I think he's a great handcuff to have, especially if you're a Foster owner. But obviously, when Foster comes back in a week or two, Alfred Blue becomes irrelevant again. But he did show a lot of things yesterday, but again, it's against the Browns who can let these things happen. So I think it's kind of a give and take there.
All right, we'll be right back after this. Razzball Radio Fantasy Sports Network. When we come back, Jay will tell us or make excuses why the Chargers are actually better than they are. Welcome back to Razzball Radio Fantasy Sports Network. Nick Capozzi, Jay Longfellow, a.k.a. JayWrong, breaking down the Sunday schedule. So your Chargers beat the Raiders 13-6. I actually had the Raiders to cover in this one. I liked the Raiders. They've been playing real well, and San Diego hasn't of late. You worried about Phillip Rivers here as a fantasy quarterback? Forget the real life, but as a fantasy quarterback?
A little bit. I mean, there's news coming out that he suffered a big rib injury a few weeks ago, and instantly when I heard, actually Antonio Gates mentioned that in an interview yesterday, and as soon as I thought about that, what came to my mind was a big hit he took against the Jets, and that makes sense because he hasn't been really the same since then. And we're talking about a guy who once played an AFC Championship game without an ACL, so he's going to play through this. When they asked Phillip Rivers about it, he just simply said, well, I'm not suffering any more than any other quarterbacks are. So that, you got to respect that. His numbers will suffer, though, until it gets healed up. Now, he just came off a bye week. That clearly didn't help him because he looked off all day yesterday. So we'll have to see how it progresses. You're kind of stuck with him because this news kind of degrades his trade value. So it's not like you can just get rid of the guy. I would hold on. I would try to have faith in the fact that he's the type of guy who can tough these things out. And the return of Ryan Matthews, who looked really good yesterday in limited action, can only do good things for this team.
Well, he did have 17 touches, so it was, I don't know, I wouldn't quantify it as limited. But do you like Matthews going forward? I mean, I know you like Matthews, period, but if you can try and look at it objectively.
Yeah, I mean, he's the primary back. It's no secret. I mean, people can say Brendan Oliver will still, but really Oliver will take over the Danny Woodhead role, 5 to 10 touches. Ryan Matthews will get his 25 touches. This is still a run-first team. They just needed a runner. Now they have him back. And let's not forget, the Raiders always play the Chargers close, so I'm willing to bet that the Chargers, even though St. Louis is really a tough team, I'm willing to bet that it's a lot better looking game than this one was. You
know what? It's easy to make fun of Oakland, but there's a lot of effort on that team. Yeah. If you actually watch them, it's a pretty gritty team. The talent isn't there, but I've actually got a lot of respect for how they're playing this year. All right, the Cardinals beat up the Lions 14-6, and beat up is fair because Drew Stanton went in there and look, he's not a game manager. It's either let me throw a bullet 12 yards to Fitzgerald, or let me just throw a Hail Mary. But you know what? They don't need him to be great. They have so many weapons on offense, and that defense is legit. They lost Washington, they lost Dockett. We thought it was going to be a terrible defense, but they've been fantastic. Kind of easy to pick on them, but they took Kelvin Johnson out of the game, only 5 receptions for 59 yards. And Andre Ellington, I was reading your rundown, of course. You want to do that every Monday at football.razzball.com. And you weren't too high on Ellington, and fair enough. 19 for 42, 4 catches for 24 yards. But he's actually 7th in running back scoring this year with only 5 touchdowns. And the reason I say only 5 is that when you look at Ellington, there's never a 2-touchdown game. Well, maybe once this year. But, the guy just puts up consistent stats. He's got more points than Charles, Lacey, and McCoy. So let me ask you that. Let me give you all 4 of those running backs. Ellington, Charles, Lacey, or McCoy. Rank them for me rest of the season for you.
Charles, McCoy, Lacey, and Ellington, but the last 3 are really close. I still love Charles. He's
having a monster year.
I don't think the Chiefs need a quarterback with him there.
Yeah.
And so, but don't get me wrong, I still like Ellington, but the team isn't as good as the other teams, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I would argue that
I disagree. I'd rather have Stanton than Sanchez right now. I would actually take the Arizona offense over the Philadelphia offense right now.
I'd say they're close, but I still think the Eagles' offense is a little more dynamic, even with Sanchez or Nacho or whatever name he wants to go by nowadays.
Yeah,
but
we'll get
even
back to
hit
that.
with this return. But no, I think I'm comfortable ranking them like that. And it's not like the Cardinals need to score many points. I mean, like I said in the rundown, I mean there are many teams that have been successful by just scoring a couple of touchdowns and then just leaning on the defense. I mean, look at the Ravens in the 90s. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. 9-1 Cards. Look out. Big party here in Arizona. Packers put up the fireworks show against the Eagles, 53-20. Aaron Rodgers, he's good. Eddie Lacy actually had a pretty good game. Randall Cobb was fantastic. But talk to me about the offense in general for the Eagles. We just kind of touched on it. what percentage does every skill player on offense drop for the Eagles with Sanchez there versus Foles, or is there no drop?
I don't think there is a drop. I mean, we saw Sanchez last night pretty much return to his Jetsiest form, I guess I'll call it. And the principals still got their yard. I mean, McCoy still did pretty well. I mean, he didn't get a touchdown, but Jordan Matthews looked good. Jeremy Maclin still got his. Honestly, it's not like Foles was really lighting it up this season. So Sanchez will have these games where he's very mediocre, and if that's the case, he'll be playing from behind, and he'll have no choice but to throw these guys or try to get them involved. If he does well, they still win too. So I don't think there's much of a change here at all.
All right, let's get to the Patriots beating the tar out of the Colts 42-20. Do you think Jonas Gray's 8.4% ownership is going to go up this week?
Oh, it will, but just you watch. Belichick next week will then start Brandon Bolden.
Totally.
Brandon Bolden will have to carry.
Totally. And it so makes me crazy. 199 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's a franchise record for the Patriots. Jonas Gray was unbelievable.
Watching that game, he honestly did not move at all. He just ran in straight lines, and the Colts were like, yes, please, come through. So, I think it was a great game, but I wouldn't go crazy over it just because the Colts defense is terrible. I mean, it's just completely, their run defense is disgusting.
Absolutely. Colts running game. Now, Ahmad Bradshaw left the game in the fourth quarter with a leg injury. We'll monitor that. Sorry?
Surprise.
I think he's 6th in running back scoring.
No.
So he was a guy I didn't see coming. Trent Richardson was a disaster. 7 carries, 0 yards. My gosh.
He was doing what he does best. He was very, considering what he's done in the past, he was very agile last night. He had some good numbers.
Let me ask you this, though. Dan Herron, 3rd on the depth chart for the Colts at running back. Is this guy worth a flyer? Because if Bradshaw's out and Richardson has been a cluster bomb, we only got about 15 seconds here, but would you take a chance on Herron?
In deep leagues, yes. Standard leagues, probably not. He's still kind of a little behind in the depth chart.
Okay. One guy if Bradshaw's out for an extended period,
I think they'll just lean on Richardson and probably do Herron as I'm not excited by it. I'm not excited at all by the running game.
Why do you hurt me? All right, we got to get out of here, buddy. We'll be back tomorrow with T-Hole. We'll talk about waiver wire pickups. Maybe we'll talk about Dan Herron. JJ, thanks for joining us, buddy. This is Razzball Radio, Fantasy Sports Network. We'll see you tomorrow.